Oh. Gururbrahma, Gururvishnu, Gurudevo Maheshwara, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vedyadravinam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. So if I remember, we are in our 4th chapter. Is that right?
Yes. Number 7.
What verse?
Number 7.
Number 7. Will you help us out, please?
Visphalu lingaryatha vedna jayante sharatasthatha vividhaschi jada bhava ityarthavniki shrutihi. The Mundaka Upanishad says that just as sparks emanate from a blazing fire, so from immutable Brahman arose different animate and inanimate things.
So again, he's footnoting this idea. What he's doing, this is a polemic. He's pushing back against the idea that the phenomenal world is created. It's not separate. It's not a part. This is completely different than, for example, the Semitic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The Hebrew psalmist says, "You are the potter, I am the clay. The only thing you need to know about God is you're not it. There's a creator, which is different from the creation and the creatures." But yoga says, the Upanishads say, in various poetic methods, no. Purnamada, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnam Udachyate. That is full. This is full. From the fullness of that, the fullness of this has proceeded or issued forth. Now, Vedanta then goes and uses 2 classic images. Pratibimba, that is a reflection in a bimba, in a mirror. And the reflections in spatika, crystal. Can we really say the image in the mirror has issued forth from the mirror? No. So we have this appearance. but is it really there as something separate? Vedanta thunders no. Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. Brahman alone is real. The phenomenal world, the Jagat, is Mithya. It's illusory. Next verse.
जगदव्याकृतं पूर्वम् आसीत् त्वया क्रियताधुना दृश्याभ्यां नामरूपाभ्यां विराडादिषु ते स्फुटे. It is also said that before its manifestation, the whole world existed in Brahman in a potential form. Then, assuming name and form, came into being as Virat.
Yes, Virat is another name for the phenomenal world. So within consciousness is the potentiality for the infinitude of name and form. Nothing can limit what Brahman can create. And what's so amazing is how complicated, beautiful, and ordered all the forms are, and how temporary. I was watching one YouTube video and they were saying something like 99% of all the forms of life, all the species that have existed on the earth are extinct. The Lord brings them into being for a long time. Same with stars, galaxies, ultimately, perhaps space-time itself. It had a beginning at the Big Bang, probably has an end. But the substratum, the ground, which is sentience itself, nitya, birthless, changeless, deathless, and sentient. God is not an it, God's a who. God is Baba, being itself. Next verse.
Viranyam nunaro gava karasht vaja vayastatha pipilika vadhi tvandam iti vaja saneyanaha. From Virat came into being the ancient lawgivers, human beings, cattle, asses, horses, goats, and so on, both male and female, down to the ants. Thus says the
Brihad Aranyaka.
Brihad Upanishad.
Yes. So here is the poetry of the cycle of creation and manifestation, from the subtle to the grossest. From this first impulse of Brahma, the creator, of Ishvara, comes the potentiality for it all. And then through time and space, I think it was the Moody Blues that had the song "We Are Stardust." Is that right, or was that Hair that had that song? But the whole idea, the very elements of our body come from the supernova, some star in the distant past. We are literally stardust. It's moved across the universe, gathered by the sun and the earth over billions of years to make the form of you and me. Absolute miracle. All of it has its origin in Brahman. And Swamiji always thundered, it's a cosmos, not a chaos. It's ordered, it's informed by intelligence. It's pretty cool. Next one.
कृत्वा रूपान्तरं जैव देहे प्राविशदीश्वरः इति ताश्रुतय प्राहुर्जीवत्वं प्राणधारणात्. According to these Shrutis, Brahman or Atman himself, assuming manifold forms as the Jivas, entered into these bodies. A Jiva is so called because it upholds vitality, pranas in a body.
Yes. So the root of jiva, which we usually think of as the individuality, is jivati, which means to live. So what makes me as an individual a living being has its origin in Brahman. Atman and Brahman are the same. Why did he do it? Nobody knows, and we don't want to attribute anthropomorphic causation to the infinite. Oh, he was lonely and he wanted company. It was so he could know himself. All these are just human ideas. All we know is that it is. I think the best explanation of all this comes from the Hebrew book of Job. In the end, after all his suffering and tribulations, Job goes, why? God says, who are you to question me? As far as the heavens are above the earth, so are my ways above. So you and I have to live with mystery. And at the human level, actually, what we're capable of seeing is so little. There's the classic image. What would an ant think of nuclear physics? Inconceivable for it. Doesn't even know it exists. So many things beyond our ken. And it's okay. Part of the human mind is we like to figure stuff out. But figuring out the world is a good place to put that. But we can know God. We just don't do it through the rational mind. What you're looking for, you are looking with, I always say. So the poetry of these various scriptures are just that. They're attempts to explain, which in the end is unexplainable. Just is. But it points at a direct experience. The mind returning from nirvikalpa samadhi, waves out of consciousness itself. And from that, the whole world takes form. So this is poetry, attempting to describe an experience. Next verse.
Chaitanyam yadhishtanam lingadehascha ya punaha chichaya lingadehastha tatsandho jiva uchyate. The substratum, or the pure consciousness, the subtle body, and the reflection of pure consciousness on the subtle body, these three together constitute a jiva.
Okay, let's break this down. First idea, say it again.
The substratum.
The substratum. I mean, the word he used here was Chaitanya. Another word for consciousness itself. It's actually used kind of loosely. It can be a synonym for chit, but it can also mean consciousness of stuff. So, for example, in the Chinmaya mission, when you take the yellow, you become a brahmachari, you're given a new name. So you can be Arpita Chaitanya, you can be Aniket Chaitanya, you can be Soham Chaitanya, the consciousness of some aspect, some dimension of the divine. And Sargadatta Maharaj actually uses the word Chaitanya to mean mind itself and all that's comprised in it. Sometimes it's used more of a synonym for chitta than for chit. So, universal consciousness. And then what's the second idea?
Pure consciousness.
That's what we just talked about.
The subtle body.
The subtle body. What is the subtle body? The subtle elements, the prana, the mind, the intellect, chitta, the flashlight quality of the mind and memory, and ahankara. All of that together, which is fundamentally inert, meaning it is not self-luminous. I illumine all those dimensions. And then the third element?
The reflection of pure consciousness on the subtle body.
Yes, the chit chaya, which is the word he's using for egoism. Shankara will talk about this half a dozen jars of water. The moon is in the sky, and you look into the jars at night, you see 6 moons. That's Chandra Chaya, the reflection of the moon. I bring out my little mirror and I shine it in everybody's face. Bimba Chaya, the reflection in the mirror. So, in the Vijnanamaya Kosha, there's this reflection of consciousness caught in the web. Now, what does that mean? Many of us in our meditation will reach this point. Okay, I've gotten to the point when my mind is pretty quiet and I've introverted my attention. see that I'm just the witness, but it feels like I'm just an individual witness. I haven't been able to see that the self in me is the self in everything. That sense of individuality still maintains. That's this Ch.4. Listen carefully. What holds that in place? Attachment and identification. All those are now in that sense of individuality. That Jiva Bhavana. Just any thoughts on this? So were those the three elements? Was there more in that verse? I think that's all.
No, these three constitute a jiva.
And that's what constitutes the sense of individuality, these three things. So the substratum of the ego is me, pure aham. Then there's the subtle body itself. And then there's that consciousness caught in the web of thought, the Ch.4, the ahankara, the jiva bhavana, the garta, has many different names. Functionally, what does it do? It attributes to the self the qualities of the non-self. It's not evil. It's just not evil. Next verse.
Mahesh Baritu Mayaya Asya Nirmana Shaktivat Vidyate Moha Shaktischa Tam Jivam Mohayat Yasao. Maya of the great Ishvara has, like its power of creation, another power which deludes all. It is this power which deludes the jiva.
So Maya has this Shakti of Vikshepa Shakti. It projects the entire universe, but it also has Avarana Shakti, meaning it deludes the beings in its own creation. This becomes easy to understand if we go to the dream state. In the dream, you have mini Maya. In the dream, it is my mind itself that creates a body, a locus of perception, an ego sense, a world outside, and feelings and thoughts inside. And listen carefully, the non-apprehension of myself as the waker. Because of that, to the dreamer, the dream seems real. So all the things and beings in this world, no fault of their own, do not know they are broken. Instead, I'm a person. The world is separate from me. Struggle, 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 struggle. So Maya not only is the power that creates all the names and form, but it's the power that deludes the beings in those names and forms. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Moha Dhanishatam Prapya Agro Vapushi Shochati Isrishtam Idam Dvaitam Sarvamuktam Samap Sataha. The jiva, thus deluded to believe himself to be powerless and identified with the body, becomes subject to grief. Thus is described in brief the duality created by Ishvara.
Yes. So when I have the non-apprehension of myself as Brahman, then I have the subsequent adhyasa, superimposition, where I think I'm my body, or my body plus the personality. I think I'm a person. And that feeling of jiva bhavana is inherently limited. It feels like there's something inherently not right. And then I think of a goal, then I think of furrowing toward it. And it can get subtler and subtler and subtler. I'm studying a text that I haven't read in, 50 years with a friend, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. It's a classic of Tibetan Buddhist literature. And that whole idea of spiritual materialism, where I make the path itself another object of desire. Want. Not just the inherent mumukshutva, the desire for liberation, but I think my ego's going to go from point A to point B. I'm going to become an enlightened person. I'm going to become a realized person. Then, even if I've had deep experience, am I really enlightened, or am I fooling myself? Is there more? This doesn't seem to be enough. Who is it who's worried about that? So the yogi abandons all ambition. Now, I was talking with Amini. She was here for Gita last night and sang again after class. My God, she's good. But her voice is so free, so natural. It's so easy and effortless. And how hard a singer has to work to not work. Same with dancers. How hard you have to study and work to not work. Someone who's a percussionist, one of my students said, can't remember who, he's studying taiko drumming. His taiko master said, you practice taiko drumming until you can drum like a child. Is that fun? So we have our purushartha, our self-effort, to come to the point where we cease making efforts. All right, next verse.
Saptanna Brahmane Dvaitam Jiva Srishtam Prapanchitam Annani saptagnanena karmana janayat pita. In the Saptana Brahmana of the Veda, there is a description of the duality created by the jiva. By action and reflection, the jiva creates 7 kinds of foods, objects of experience.
So we don't need to go into the particulars of it, but what he's implying here is it is the knowing of things that determines their existence. Back in the old EST training, which I did in the 70s, Werner Erhard would point to the chair on the stage and he said, "Is that a chair?" "Yeah, it's a chair." He says, "To an Australian Aborigine, it's firewood. They have no idea of a chair. If it's growing in the ground, it's a tree. If it's not growing anymore, it's firewood. They cannot see a chair." Likewise, Eskimos have 30 some words for snow. They see a different world than you or I. And it's speech, it's conception, it's sanskara, impression, and memory. But it literally makes our world. I was reading something, or not reading, I was listening to something on YouTube, watching it. And it seems in many, many ancient languages, the word for blue and the word for black is the same word. And this person was positing that ancient peoples didn't see shades of blue like you and I do. They didn't discern the differences. That's something we've learned to do over the centuries. But to summarize, the mind is the world and the world is the mind. My mind is my world. Your mind may be different, meaning you're going to see a different world, even though we're walking the same streets. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Atyar namme kandevan me dve paschannam chaturthakam anyatriyam atmartham annanam vinayojanam. One kind is meant for men, 2 for the celestial beings, the 4th for the lower animals, and the remaining 3 for the self. Thus the food is divided.
Yes. So the devas get the essences of the sacrifice. The lower animals get, the grass and the leaves. There's food for humans, and then the self is the knower of the field in all fields, the consumer of the elements of the sacrifice in all sacrifices, meaning all perception is ultimately no. Next verse. Is there a note on that, by the way?
No note.
Okay, going on.
Vrahyadikam darshapurnam asaushiram tatha manah vak pranashcheti sam tattvam annanam avagamyatam. Grains such as wheat are for men. The ingredients of the full moon and the new moon sacrifices are for the devas. Milk is for the lower animals, and the mind, the speech, and the vital airs are for the self. These are the 7 kinds of food.
Yes, so he's just broken it down again. This is allegory. Ultimate meaning of it all is I know everything. I eat objects, emotions. Next verse.
ईशेन यद्यप ईशेन यद्यपेतानि निर्मितानि स्वरूपतः तथापि ज्ञानकर्माभ्यां जीवो कार्षि तदन्नताम्. Though all these objects are in themselves created by Ishvara, still by action and reflection, the Jiva has converted them into his objects of enjoyment. Hence, they are said to be his creation.
Yes. So again, in the Hebrew scripture, I think it's on the 6th day of creation, God creates human beings and then he tells them to name everything, which I always found very interesting because in our naming of things, we determine its use and its value to ourselves as equals. Like, what's the difference between a weed and a plant?
The usefulness of it from a human perspective.
You got it. Did you all hear that? He said that softly.
The usefulness of it from a human perspective.
Yeah. That's all. Weed your garden means remove the plants that are not useful to you. Oh. And things can change. There was a time when people thought tomatoes were poisonous. Wouldn't eat them. They discovered, no, they're not poisonous. But that's what the human mind does. And then it creates memory and stories, and that's how culture develops. Now, one of the things that's interesting, we're not the only species that does that. There are other tool using species and species with culture, forming family groups with relationships, do things we don't necessarily understand. Like, why do whales breach? Jump out of the water and make a big splash. I was watching one video, and some scientists think it's art. The whales underneath the water look up and they see the design that the breaching whale makes. Isn't that a cool idea? Or blue whales, their songs. Is this just communication? Or is this some form of art? Lots of tool using animals. But we determine what things are through speech. If I say, bring me a hammer, you know what a hammer is. Speech determines it's in your bag. Next verse.
Ishkaryam Jivabhogyam Cha Ishkaryam Jivabhogyam Ja Jadvabhyam Samanvitam Pitrijanya Bhartribhogya Yatha Yoshitta Shesh Yatam. As they are created by Ishvara and become objects of experience and enjoyment for the Jiva, so they are related to both, just as a woman is related both to the parents who brought her into being and to the husband who loves her.
Yes. So these things come into being by Ishvara. But then we determine their use and value, and then we start modifying them. So right now, I'm sitting in a chair. Chair is covered by leather. Ishvara made the cow. But somebody took the dead cow and cut it up and tanned the leather and dyed it to cover the chair. Those the two together. We use the elements of nature, form and reform for our use. Next.
Maya Vrityatmako Isha Sankalpa Sadhanam Janao Mano Vrityatmako Jiva Sankalpo Bhoga Sadhanam. In the actual creation of the objects, the modification or functions of Maya, the power of the Lord, are the cause, whereas for the actual enjoyments of those objects, it is the modifications or functions of the inner organs of the Jiva that are responsible.
Yeah. So the stuff of creation comes to us by nature, but then we use it and modify. And it's the two together that creates human life. Not bad. He's just explaining what is. Next verse.
Ishnir Mittam Yadav Vastunyeka Vidhe Sthite Bhok Bhoktrir Dhivrittina Natvat Tat Bhogo Bahudheshyate. Objects created by Ishvara, example gems, do not alter, they remain the same. But gems may affect different people differently according to their mental states.
So the things in the world that come from Ishvara can affect people differently. He's using the metaphor of gems. One that comes to my mind, my friend Ron and I will frequently on Fridays after our session go to dinner to Golden Lotus. And he always tells them no cilantro because cilantro affects certain people. It's a genetic thing where it overwhelms the taste buds and tastes terrible to some people. I did not know this. I is one of those people who can't stand cilantro. I love it. So the same object affects two people in different ways. Some people love to drink coffee. Other people, oh, I can't stand it. It makes me jittery. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
हृष्यत् ये के मणि लब्ध्वा क्रुध्यन् क्रुध्यत्यन्यो ह्यलाभतः पश्यत् विद्येव निरत्कोत्र न हृष्यति न कुप्यति. One man may feel happy on obtaining a gem, whereas another may feel disappointed at failing to obtain it. And a man uninterested in it may only look on and feel neither happy nor disappointed.
Yes. So let's see. I think it was one of the kings of England. When he was disinterred, they dug him up to rebury him. And one of his descendants saw that he had this fabulous gem on his ring. So he took the gem. They reburied him without the gem. But you or I could go to the Tower of London and look at the crown jewels. Pretty to look at. No, I don't want a big funny hat. They're heavy. Many, many things in this world. Somebody wants it, somebody's jealous about it. Now there's others. No desire. So the implication here that we can also look at is, what is it that has happiness or joy as its swabhava, as its dharma? Everybody experiences sweetness and sugar, wetness and water, heat and fire. People do not get joy from the same things. It varies from object to object. Why? We will cover this in great depth in the bliss section, which is the third section of the scripture, the last five chapters. Going on.
Priyo priya upekshyaschcha atkara mani kasrateha srishti jivai risrishta srishta jivairis shashtrishtam rupam sadharanam trishu. The jiva creates these three feelings of happiness, disappointment, or indifference with regard to the gem, but the nature of the gem as created by Ishvara remains the same throughout.
Yes. So the suchness, the thatness of things created by the Lord just is. You and I superimpose these three ideas. It's desirable, it's not desirable, or I'm indifferent. So practice is implied here. Can we move through the world setting aside that raga and that dvesha? What's the word for indifference that he uses? Can you suss it out?
Upeksha.
Upeksha. Okay. Just see the world, all its splendor, just as it is. Next verse.
Bharya snusha nanandacha Yata mate yanekata Pratiyogi dhiya yoshi Hikhyate na swarupatah. Through personal relationships, one and the same woman appears differently as a wife, a daughter-in-law, a sister-in-law, a cousin, and a mother, but she herself remains unchanged.
Yes, just another example. The suchness of something is. But each of us has our different ideas about the same thing. Going on.
Nanu jnanani bhintantman karastu na bhidyate yoshit vapushyati shayo na drishto jiva nirmatah. Objection. These different relationships may be seen, but no changes in the woman's appearance are seen to result from other people's ideas about her.
Okay, I'm not sure I understand the objection. So, different relatives see the same woman, but she remains without changing because of that perception. Let's see what the reply is.
Maivam mansamayi yoshit kachidanya manomayi mansaman mansam maya abhedepi bhidyate hi manomayi. Reply. Not so. The woman has a subtle body as well as a physical body composed of flesh, etc. Although other people's ideas about her may not affect her physical body, yet they can change her mental state.
Yes. Oh, that's wonderful. So, you grow up and your parents tell you you're brilliant, you're smart, you go to the local school and you're an A student. You finish high school and you go to Oxford or UC Berkeley. And all of a sudden, everybody around you is as smarter. The body doesn't change. Feelings sure do. Oh, I'm no longer top dog. The athlete who's the superstar in high school and college goes to the NFL and he's on the practice squad, not even on the actual team. So the opinions of others can affect us. And they affect all sorts of things. For example, if you approach a dog and you're nervous and fearful, the dog will respond. But you watch a child, a 2-year-old, go up to a dog who has no fear. There's just completely different response. Now listen very carefully. Back in my old days studying metaphysics before I met Swamiji, we had a class, our prayer therapy class, which was about healing work. The exercise is you had 3 pie tins and you were sprouting bean sprouts. In old timey days, you put wet toweling paper down and then put the seeds and covered them up and you watered them and stuff like that. And the assignment was 1 pie tin was your control. 1 pie tin you praised every day. 1 pie tin you cursed. You're terrible seeds, you're out of alignment with life, you can't grow. You're fabulous, you're wonderful, you're just full of life. And it was absolutely astounding how alfalfa seeds or mung seeds would respond to our thoughts. So what the scripture is saying here is we're subtly moving into the area of potentiality of Tantra. But the quality of our thoughts, the intentions of our emotions can make a difference in the world. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Bhranti swapna manorajya smritish vastu manomayam jagran manena mayasya na manomayateti chet. Objection. Though it may affect the objects perceived in the states of delusion, dreaming, remembering, and imagining, the mind cannot affect the objects perceived through the senses in the waking state.
So he's saying, okay, things in the subtle world, the mind won't affect it, but it cannot affect the matter. Let's see what the reply is.
Padham mane tu me yena yogat syad vishaya kriti bhashyavati kakarabhyam ayamartha udiritah. Reply. True. Acharya Shankara, Sureshwara, and others acknowledge the fact that the mind assumes the form of the external object with which it comes into contact and modifies that form to suit its purposes.
So here he's saying, I see a pillow over there. My mind doesn't necessarily change the nature of the pillow. But whether I like the pillow, whether I hate the pillow, whether the pillow is useful or not, my mind determines that. Actually, we have far more freedom than we think we do. Deep, deep understanding here is it's a value to not be a jerk. It's a value to intend the well-being of everyone and everything. We've talked about this meditation that's done at the end of so many Vipassana retreats, the metta meditation. It's always some form of may all beings be happy, may all beings be peaceful, may all beings be liberated. Why do they do it at the end of the retreat? Why does the group do it? Do it at the end because everybody's mind is so quiet. Mind is the most powerful. And then that sankalpa goes out into the world and it makes a difference. But even whether or not we are intending to affect the world, it certainly makes a difference for you and me. So you have a fight with someone. It's of value to say, I was in the wrong. I got angry. That was hurtful, and I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? The energy shifts. lot more freedom to make a difference in the world, to clean up what appears to be the externals of our life. Simply understanding, not an isolated being having no effect on other people. It's a terrible illusion. Next verse.
मूषासिक्तं यथा ताम्रं तन्निभं जायते तथा रूपादिव्याप्नु विचित्तं तन्निभं दृश्यते ध्रुवम्. Sri Shankara says that just as melted copper assumes the form of the mold into which it is cast, so the mind assumes the form of the object perceived by it.
So the point here is that actually the senses never really make contact with anything in the world. If I look over there on the sofa and I see a pillow, am I really seeing a pillow? Well, actually, what's happening is light from the lamps bounces off the pillow, comes back and enters my eyes. The lenses literally turn it upside down. It then impresses on my retina, where it's then translated into electromagnetic nerve impulse, which then goes to my brain, which interprets it. You know, there's this huge anatomical process. But no, I don't actually contact the pillow. First, there's light. Then there's nerve impulse. And then you compare it with memory, past impression, etc. How do I know it's a pillow? Because I've been taught that it's a pillow. Mind assuming a form like a mold or a piece of copper. Now, what's the purpose of him going down this road? Everything we see in the end is basically my opinion of stuff. If you remove all sanskara, you can't really see a world. It's just raw sense data. I always think of an infant, a newborn. They put mobiles above the crib. Why? Who told the baby to focus their eyes? They don't see the way you and I see. They learn to focus. When things are compared with memory and other sensory data, things going in the moment. You or I go out to dinner and our dinner is all over the front of our shirt. I feel like such a slob. Doesn't bother an infant in the least. They're just fine with food all over their face and down their front and their hands. Doesn't bother them in the least. They haven't been taught to be neat yet. It's all mine. Now, there's nothing wrong with this. All a yogi wants to do is not take his or her mental impressions seriously. Do not confuse opinion with truth. Do not confuse judgment with reality. Take yourself lightly. All right, next verse.
व्यञ्जको वा यथा लोको व्यङ्ग्यस्याकारतामियात् सर्वार्थव्यञ्जकृत्वाधि अर्थकारा pradishyate. Or, just as sunlight assumes the form of the objects which it illumines, so the mind assumes the form of the objects which it perceives.
Same idea. Going on.
Matum ani matum nabhini nishpatti nishpanna meyameti tat meya bhinsangatam tacca meya bhatvam prapadyate. Sri Sureshwara holds, out of the cognizer, that is the Shiva, that is the Jiva, cognition, an appropriate modification of the mind is produced. Thus born, the modification proceeds towards the object of cognition until it gets into touch with the object, when it assumes the form of the object, which is known as the cognition of the object.
Yes. So the example I like to use, you're out at Ocean Beach and you look out across the water and you see something. Then the mind and intellect go through this process. It's white. Then the mind goes, what is it? What is it? What is it? It wants to determine the suchness, the thatness of it. Is it a boat? Is it a buoy? Is it a sail? And then you go, aha, it's a sail. Oh, it's a sailboat. Then memory, mind, past experience goes, oh, gosh, it would be so good to be out sailing. I haven't been sailing in so many years. How I used to love sailing with my dad. Oh, I remember going sailing in Hawaii with my brother. Oh, it would be so cool to go on one of those big square riggers when Fleet Week comes, da 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 da. And you get all the emotions, or oh, I got so seasick the last time I was on a boat. I never want to do that again. Oh, so all we do first, you just have direct perception. You got to figure out what it is. Then the stories that creates my world. Now, this is far more modern. I happen to like the image that Ramana Maharshi uses of the old-timey movie projector. Consciousness, the self, is like the lamp. The mind is like the film in the movie projector. My world is what shows up on the screen. What's the relationship between the film and the movie on the screen? Basically the same thing. The mind is the world and the world is the mind. So some of the Buddhists will say, get rid of all your judgments and see the world as it is. The Vedantins would say, knock yourself out. That's like scraping the images off the film. Those are my judgments. Those are my impressions. Those are the stories. Those are the sanskaras. So if I scrape all the images off the film, what shows up on the screen? I like. So if we are seeing a world, we're seeing our projections. No escape. What does the yogi do? Know that these are projections. Then you don't get seduced by it. You don't mistake a sanskara for truth. Then you can set it aside. It's not real. It's an incredibly important lesson. All right, we'll end here. What verse are we on for next week?
Verse 31.
Okay. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Sri Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om.